Hey, good morning, guys. Good morning. My name is Technical Sergeant Trina. I am a Group MTO with the Special Warfare Training Group, and today I got another professional development segment called Airmanship 200. So, we're gonna get started with this. First, what we're gonna talk about is what's airmanship, right? We do it every single stream. We talk about what airmanship is, and what airmanship is it's your inherent, your need, your ability to feel intrinsic value by being in the Air Force and having an identity as an airman, not necessarily just your AFSC. So, like Marine Corps identify as being a Marine, Army soldiers identify as being a soldier. We want you as an airman to identify as being an airman over your AFSC. So, Airmanship is our professional development program that's really designed about helping you find some intrinsic value, find your why of why you joined the military, and what you're doing to make sure that you can provide the best level of service that you can to the United States Air Force. So with that, just know that all the opinions that are on this broadcast are my own and my guests. All the material that's presented is created for us by 2nd Air Force in regards to how we produce Airmanship 200. So the intention is that this is originally supposed to be taught, or I should say facilitated, in a way that is small group discussion. But with this COVID-19 pandemic, what we do right now is we're going to do this live stream. We're going to bring on guests. We're going to talk about what that topic is and what we're doing. And that way we can help find our why. Make sure that we're proud of our Air Force tattoos. Okay, guys? Next one. Please chat it up. For those of you who are viewing the live stream right now, get it in chat, type your questions out, ask questions to us. As myself and my guests are talking, make sure that you are paying attention and asking those questions about what your perspective is. Like, what we really want to know is we want to know what those airmen in the dorm are thinking. So please put whatever questions you have in the chat. As long as it's appropriate, I'll read it off and you'll be able to get my opinion and also my guest's opinion as well. And speaking of guests, today I have Chief Master Sergeant Popovic. Hey, Chief, how are you doing?
Chris, how are you this morning?
I'm doing great, Chief. Do you mind introducing yourself, Chief, real quick, for those of us who don't know you?
No, not at all. Thanks, Chris. Hey, first off, real quick, I just want to thank you guys for Sergeant Trina, and the Special Warfare Training Support Squadron for putting this together. All right. Today, we're going to be talking about leadership, and I tell you, it starts with initiatives and innovation like we're doing right now. You know, in this COVID environment, everything that we're going through, it's become a challenge, right? But we didn't stop there. We knew that Airmanship 200 needed to go. You guys came up with this platform and executed, and so I just want to thank you for that. So today, leadership, right? So it goes hand in hand. So quick introduction. So Chief Master Sergeant Todd Popovic grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania, joined the Air Force at 19 years old. First came in as a security policeman, now security forces. Did my first tour over in Japan, came back, did another tour in Texas, and during what used to be called Defender Challenge back in the day, Special Tactics Recruiting found me, and I cross-trained into pararescue at that time. So through a few assignments, transition, went over to England, did Special Tactics over in England for 4 years. Came back to the States, did Moody Air Force Base 38th Rescue Squadron for about 3 years. Went out to Curlin, became a pararescue instructor out at the pararescue school. Left there, went to Davis-Monthan, where I served 3.5 years at the 48th Rescue Squadron. And then from there, went up to Air Combat Command staff at Langley Air Force Base, and I was the pararescue functional manager. Then from that tour, did about 2.5 years there, transitioned to in 2017 that brought me here as the Battlefield Airmen Training Group Superintendent, now Special Warfare Training Group Superintendent. So that's just a little bit about me in terms of my introduction.
Thanks, Chief. That's great. Awesome. So as we kick off this Airmanship 200 concept of talking about leadership, I'm sure Chief is going to give us, he's been in for a while, he's going to give us a huge, an amazing perspective on what leadership is. He's been practicing for a while, and I can tell you, being in his command, I absolutely see leadership from that perspective. But what I want to tell you, Airmen, as you guys progress through your ranks and what you guys are doing, take the concepts that he's talking about now and try to apply them to what you're doing, whether that be in training, in the dorms, or your personal life. Everything that you have going on right now, you guys are making a huge transition from your time as a civilian to BMT to special warfare training. And since you guys have gone through that ginormous transition, there's a lot of learning that's involved. And while you might have been a leader on the outside world, while you're here, it's a little bit different, guys. So take his perspective, think about what he's saying, think about what we're talking about here, and try to see how you can apply that to your life in the dormitory, as an airman, as someone who's going through special warfare training, anybody who's going through tactical training. So please utilize these concepts the way, like, because Chief's going to give us this broad aspect, this big leadership, and let's kind of try to help connect it to what we're doing. Awesome. All right, Chief. So let's go over to the lesson. Here we go. So this is supposed to be a guided discussion, and with that, it's going to be me and you, Chief, talking about it. And we're going to hit this boot stomp here. Being in charge does not mean you are an effective leader. Leadership is the art of motivating individuals to achieve a common goal. A leader must create a sense of belonging and worth in their followers to reach their vision. Individuals don't decide to be a good leader. They are elected by their followers. What do you think about that, Chief? What do you think about being elected by their followers as leadership?
No, so that's a great point. And let me tell you, Chris, after doing this for 26 years, I do not have the market cornered on leadership. It is a lifelong learning approach. I mean, it's constant. So I'm always learning. In terms of the followers and electing, you know, I remember going through the Senior NCO Academy at Maxwell, and one of the first quotes when I came in on the board was, leadership is less about your position and more about your disposition. And so to me, you know, I kind of had to sit back and think through that for a moment, but it's more about your disposition. What's your perspective? It's less about the position you're sitting in, and it's more about taking care of the folks that have elected you into that position. You know, so when I think back to that, I think back to the supervisors that I've had, because any journey within the Air Force or even in the civilian sector, you don't do it alone. You know, as we were growing up, you know, you've heard the phrase, it takes a village to raise a kid. Mm-hmm. So you always have those mentors, you know, when you think back before you came in the military and then as you grew up in the military. So I think, again, you know, for that point alone, it goes back to, it's more about your disposition on leadership versus your position.
Absolutely. I think, and to speak on that, and from my perspective and the experiences that I had in the military, when I first joined, I remember a lot of people complaining about their leadership, especially as I was talking about that transition from civilian life to military, to military life, and I don't think that transition really solidifies or is completed probably until you get to your first duty location. And then you're kind of embedded and you really start to get this military system down, because technical training, guys, it's a temporary time. So I remember people complaining about their leadership. And when it came down to me, well, don't get me wrong, leadership's going to ask a lot of us all the time. Like, they're going to make sure that the military gets its, gets its dues by our enlistment. Like, when we raised our right hand and said that we're going to join this establishment, they're going to make sure that we do the work. But on top of that, and there was a lot of good stuff, at least in my perspective, there was a lot of good stuff that happened to me. And the funny thing is like, a lot of good stuff happened to a lot of the airmen around me as well, but they didn't associate the good stuff with their leadership. They kind of associated it as something that they did, that they had, or that was almost a right to them, but they didn't associate it with the leadership allowing them or helping them or supporting them and getting to the areas that they're at now. So I think, airmen, as you guys are going through and as you guys are being successful in your training, if you're being successful in your personal life, if you're being successful in the endeavors that you have, and after you get to your first duty location, if you're being recognized at all, realize that that's leadership. And leadership in the Air Force, that's the Air Force. So if you guys are saying, hey, oh man, the Air Force did me wrong in any way, shape, or form, I want you to think about that and think about the good things that you have in your life right now. And the truth is that's your leadership, and that's the Air Force. So, I mean, obviously not in all aspects, but professionally, and then maybe even a little bit personally, right? Because as you guys gain your paychecks and the stuff that you get while you guys go through the military, that can help get you what you need personally as well. So, Chief, as we go into the guided discussion, what is leadership? What's leadership to you, Chief?
You know, so that is the fundamental question. You know, it's this kind of broad, fuzzy term. I mean, when you think leadership, you know, automatically, entity, iconic figures can pop in your head. I mean, it could start at home, right? It could start from your father, your mother. It could be a teacher, a sports coach that you remember, you know, or some of the great iconic leaders, you know, President Lincoln, Winston Churchill, you know, those leaders that, you know, started in certain aspects from nothing and built their journey on leadership and became something towards the end there. So fundamentally, that's it. So the art of leadership, right? It's taught in schools, it's taught in the military, it's taught in the private sector. It's valued and sought after by everyone that's part of an organization, right? That organization could be the family, right? So in terms of where you grew up, you know, you typically flock to the leader of the family. Somebody has to stand up and be the leader of the family. You know, it could be the military unit, a company that you work for, whatever the case is, you know, leadership is important. So what makes leadership such a valued characteristic, and how do you develop it? You know, I'm going to give you just my own understanding of basic fundamentals that, again, I've gleaned over the last 26 years. And trust me, I think I understood work ethic growing up in Pennsylvania and joining the military. But leadership, especially servant leadership, was definitely foreign to me as a younger airman coming in. And so it definitely took some hurdles and some obstacles and some really strong mentoring from supervisors along that path that helped me realize what real leadership is. And again, less about the position, more about that disposition.
Absolutely. As I think about this, especially you're right. There's 100 definitions of what leadership is. From my perspective, is I completely agree with you. I think that servant leadership is probably the best definition that we can go for in the Air Force and the military and our mentorship structure for Air Force structure. I think leadership like that, thinking about it in that aspect as servant leadership, is highly important. And then adding in the aspects of followership as well, because as we try to apply this to our airman training and our airman technical training, I want you guys to think, as you guys go through your training, there's going to be people who, in special warfare training, we got our team leads, and those team leads rotate out quite a bit depending on how well they perform. And with that, think about being not the team lead right now. Think about being that follower that's within that team. Now you can help that individual be successful as a leader, and to be honest with you, you have to, because if you don't, they're not going to be a leader. So think about that, guys, as you guys transition through the ranks and what you can do right now. Whoever your team lead is, and it doesn't really make much difference if you guys have a personal connection, like you guys are best friends. It doesn't make a difference at all, because think about as you go through your career in the military. Let's assume that you're a 20-year guy, right? You're going to do your whole entire career in the military. There's going to be a bunch of leaders, guys, that you won't connect with. It won't be like, hey, we're best friends, or I don't. There's going to be leaders that you don't like. There's going to be supervisors that you don't like. But with that, for you to be successful, they need to be successful. And everyone, as Chief said, leadership isn't necessarily something that's inherent. It's something that's practiced. I think that's kind of, you gotta practice it, and which means that you as a follower need to give the leader the ability to practice, guys. That means that you got to think about them, think about what they're doing, and say, hey, look, okay, maybe not the best way to lead me. Give them that communication in a very respectful manner, and then give them the ability to grow as a leader. And then that'll help you grow as a leader and a follower. So as you're practicing leadership, Chief, thank you so much for that explanation about leadership. Leadership is your ability to lead people at the most basic sense, but there's so many theories about it. And then think about how you airmen can apply that leadership in your situation right now. Whether you're on team, whether you're a student out of training, whether you're waiting to be reclassed, whether you're waiting to go to your next course, whether you're waiting to heal up. Think about, hey, all you guys who are on what we have at Special Warfare is called White Team. That's members who have been medically injured but are waiting to go back into course. How can you guys lead? How can you guys stay dedicated? A lot of injuries take a long time to heal. Stay dedicated, help motivate your peers, and that's your leadership right there. There's levels of leadership. So, Chief, after I get off my soapbox right here, people aren't here to hear me talk, they're here to hear you talk. As we get off this leadership, like what is leadership topic, we'll go into examples of positive leadership attributes. What do you think about that, Chief? What are some positive leadership attributes?
Well, no, thanks for that question, Chris. So, going back real quick, just to kind of cover down on the what is leadership. And I've thought about that in terms of how would I just in a very concise manner define that. And there's one quote that I like from a book called Leadership: The Warrior's Art. It's the task of a leader is to inspire the best in others so they can contribute meaningfully to the overall good of the organization. So it goes back. So if you're a student right now and you've got your team leader, and just like Chris said, you might filter through several team leaders depending on how well they do. And I'll tell you, it's a two-way street, right? Just like you hit on earlier about leadership and followership. So a lot of times, we expect a lot from our leaders. So it's critical that the leader helps the followers understand, hey, what are we doing? The why behind everything. And once they understand that, 9 times out of 10, they'll get on board. They understand what's going on, the direction we're moving out in. But equally important is the follower. And so with that, helping the leader get to the end, get to that end zone, whatever the goal is, it's important to recognize that as the follower. And I can think back of examples. When I was going through the pararescue indoctrination course back in '98, we would have we had our leadership element that was part of that group. When we started with approximately 120 students and we graduated 11, we went through some leaders within that cohort. But what made the difference is the students that were left standing that actually walked the stage, so to speak, were the ones that clicked. The leaders provided the expectations, they provided the insight, the goals, and the followers were there helping them out. But it wasn't just that leader. He couldn't do it by himself. It took the followers to be there along with him. So if it was your team equipment need to be prepped, early show times, whatever the case was, it was a kind of a two-way street when it comes to that relationship. And with that, good things will come out of it. When I look back to that definition in terms of the contributing meaningfully to the overall good of the organization. So you can take that, what I like about that definition of leadership is you can apply it anywhere. It's not just in the military, it's in your family. If you're a student that's got a family back home, or you're working through a distance relationship, that's difficult. So that term organization, for the better part of that organization, you can apply that to your family. You can apply it as a student leader, a military leader, a company leader. And you'll see this scattered throughout. The books have been written, movies made, and speakers paid. The question is, how do you become a leader? Are people born a leader, or are they developed through self-discipline and experience over time? So the grand question is, how do you develop yourself to become a leader, and simply be able to apply that in everyday life?
Absolutely. I can't agree more. And that is really, that's difficult, and it's going to be different for everybody too, right? Like, there's going to be people where at least I've had supervisors, and they're in positions of leadership, right? Then there's two different types of leaders. Like, there's those positions of leadership, and then there's those, like you talked about, in the intrinsic leadership, where I'm inspired by someone else's actions of leadership that helps me be a better airman and a better person. And then there's there positions where they just basically, they're either higher ranking, or they're in a position where they're my boss. And I've had those individuals who, by the way, at least for military standards, customs, and courtesies, absolutely earn the same level of respect as any other leader in the Air Force, right? But where I wasn't stoked about how they were leading. I didn't find a connection to it. And the thing is, guys, is that's not bad. That isn't bad. That's just different styles of leadership, some of which really speak to you as an individual, and then some of which don't. And if you give people, like I was kind of talking about, and how Chief is talking about, if you give people the opportunity to learn, because being a leader, not only in the follower aspect, you have to adapt as a leader too. So Chief was talking about making sure that you got the value, or the intrinsic value, or you're help giving people intrinsic value, so that they want to be that follower of the leader. But that leader has to adapt as well. If that leader wants to, I think any leader that wants to be able to grow and lead a larger group of individuals, you're going to have to adapt to the leadership style that fits best to each one of your subordinates. And I think that's that servant leadership that we're talking about as well. It can't be like, hey, look, this is and for certain aspects of what we do in the military, there's going to be things where your leaders, your team leads, your crew chief, your whatever, is going to say, do this, do it now. There is no time for us to discuss the why. There's going to be those aspects. And you as an airman, you need to realize if you can try to do your best to recognize those situations. And then go back later when it's more appropriate to ask why. But there's those two times, and we as leaders should recognize that as well. Hey, there's a time where I can give you the why, and there's a time where I can't. Right now, this is the one where I can't. Do what I tell you, please, and let's get moving forward. But I think I'm going all over the place here. But so as a leader, know that you need to adapt to the individuals around you, and know that you need to adapt to the situation. And then as a follower, know that there's a time for why, and there's a time for no, where you're not going to get a reason why. And recognize between the two, and then go back and ask, get your mentorship from that leadership moment after the fact when it's more appropriate. What do you think about, does that kind of sum up a little bit of, I guess, the balance between leadership and followership right there, Chief?
Yeah, I think so. Because I think they're equally important.
Mm-hmm.
Because you could have a great leader, and just like to your point, if you don't like that leadership style, you as a student, you as an airman, you as an individual could be a real stick in the mud. If that's the direction you want to go, and it could make that leader's position and that leader's job a lot harder than it would necessarily have to be. So I think it's important, and that goes back to it, just having character, I think, and understanding that people are going to have, they're going to have vulnerabilities. They're going to have not everyone's got this covered across the board. So I think it's important to recognize, hey, just any command team relationship, it's important to understand, like, hey, I know I'm weak in these areas. Help watch my flanks on this, and,
mm-hmm.
and together you make a better command team out of it. So no, I think it's equally important to be a good follower if you don't find yourself in that leadership position.
I like that. I mean, speaking on character, I mean, that's positive leadership attributes, right? That's one of the things that we're talking about. So character is one of those, if we had to list off a group of words that describes a leader, I think character is one of those up there that we can for sure put in a positive attribute. Are there any other lists of words or words that we could put in this list, do you think, Chief?
Yeah, so, as you transition, I call that kind of leadership fundamentals.
Mm-hmm.
And you may not start out this way. That, that's just a realization that we all come from different walks of life. You may not have had, that, we'll say, that picture perfect kind of upbringing, whatever the case is. So sometimes, again, it goes back to that you're not inherently raised with some of those characters. So you may have some flaws. We all do. But I think it's really that pursuit. And if you care enough about it to become that best version of yourself, you'll kind of focus on what those leadership fundamentals are. And so in my mind, that foundation resides with character. The value of being a good human goes far and beyond. If we look at that as just your base, your foundation, I mean, to the point where we have completely restructured how we select within special warfare. And so we consider, the days of, assessing individuals based strictly on their physical merit is in the past. And we're implementing a lot more assessment, not only on the physical aspects of individuals, but on their character and some of their attributes that they display when we put them in difficult situations. Not all the time, and we'll do it from an individual perspective, a team perspective, just to gain that insight. Again, going back fundamentally, character is that basic sense that drives that foundation.
Yep. I mean, fundamental leadership, character, just ensuring that you're a good person. I can't. Wow. I mean, when you put it in that perspective, like, I don't want to say that it simplifies it, but if you can think about it in that aspect, that one gives you a lot of personal responsibility, right? Because character is all about you. You can't. You don't gain character from somebody else. Do you get to follow someone else's example? Yeah, but you get to decide what your own character is, and your motivations, and what you do, and how much you care about your fellow airmen or the people around you. Character is one of those attributes that is just solely responsible on the member. And that gives, in my opinion, that gives you a lot of power as an individual to try and hone your leadership abilities. You get to decide how much character you have. Now, the thing is, guys, is you got to identify when you don't have it. And that might be a little bit difficult, right? Those are the blind spots that we're talking about, and that's what Chief was saying, is having your fellow airmen watch your flanks and being able to recognize when maybe there was an error in character. I'll tell you right now, like, there's times where, whether it be my supervisor, my peers, pull me aside and say, Sergeant Trainer, like, what was that about? And luckily, I've been surrounded by individuals who have been giving me a lot of leeway to practice leadership, and who've helped me identify when I've made errors in judgment. I remember, I'll give a scenario real quick, Chief. One of the other great MTLs that we have in the 353rd, Technical Sergeant Miller, he's a flight chief of the 353rd over there. I was doing something, but I saw an issue in one of the dormitories, and I went there immediately into his office, and there was a group of airmen in his office, and not only did I interrupt whatever conversation they were having, but I directed those airmen to do something, to go clean up whatever it was. And luckily, Sergeant Miller has the social intelligence to realize that, that's a little weird, Sergeant. Like, he didn't go off on me immediately, or I don't want to say go off on me at all. He was able to have a responsible conversation with me about, hey, man, like, first and foremost, maybe be a little bit more courteous when barging into other people's offices. And then secondly, those are my guys. So talk to me about the issue, and then I'll get it resolved. And the fact that he was able to have that conversation with me helped me grow as an individual. It was an error in judgment. I thought about it for a while, too. And so he was able to give me that constructive feedback in a way that didn't feel, I guess, threatening. And it really helped me grow as an individual. And it really showcased his ability to lead. Because instead of going off and being frustrated and angry about it, he really helped me grow. So, I mean, that's one small situation where I think we got a lot of leaders here in Special Warfare, but, I mean, Sergeant Miller definitely stood out and has made an impact on my career. And we're the same rank. Like, and I absolutely look up to him as a leader, because he's able to do stuff like that and help other people grow, even when they're kind of wrong. So, I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's good, Chris. And that goes back to, when we look at, again, character attributes, it goes back to humility, right? Because you can't grow as a human being. Just put leadership aside. You can't grow unless you're humble enough to accept criticism, feedback, especially when it's steering to make you a better person, better human being. I always try to set some time aside in the morning just to have what I call some strategic reflection. What am I setting myself up for today? The week. What has already happened in the preceding days, and where have I made some errors, and where can I improve? And that's not just at work; it's family, it's everything. So yeah, you got to be able to accept, those vector checks, we'll call them, when you need it. And again, if you're humble enough and you capitalize on those opportunities, it's going to make you better in the long game.
I really like that term, the vector checks. I really like that term. It kind of feels, it's constructive criticism, but that term just makes it feel a lot better, vector checks. I got vector checked by Sergeant Miller, and it was great. All right, Chief. Examples of, if we can move on a little bit forward, examples of negative leadership attributes. I mean, they got a whole bunch of words here. Emotional, inconsistent, egocentric, selfish, detached, shows favoritism, hypocritical. What do you think about those examples of negative leadership aspects?
So negative leadership, right? So a lot of those character flaws can absolutely make a difference. And I'll tell you, the higher in, say, stature or rank or position you're in, we'll say some of those flaws or some of those vector checks that don't occur earlier on in your career can really manifest into larger issues later on. I can think back, and leading by example is always one that I like. It's probably one of the more overused types, but I tell you, it means a lot. When we have our airmen, especially specifically our special warfare airmen, out there every morning PTing, me for one, I've got to be able to lead by example. I got to be able to reflect those same kinds of commitment and discipline. So I will make sure daily that I'm out there doing as much as I can to maintain my physical fitness. But a quick vignette, when we talk leading by example. So when I first came in, like I told you, back in '94, I was a cop, and I was stationed over in Japan. And if you've ever been over in Sawa, a northern part of Japan, they get some pretty extreme weather in the winter months. And on average, about 180 inches of snow per year. Well, we were doing a lot of field maneuvers, prepping for deployments and whatnot. And we were in the field, I think, 1 year, 9 months out of the year.
Oh, wow.
So you really got used to living in a foxhole and just working through the cold environment. And I can remember being in my foxhole. I was a 60 gunner, and I just remember being in that foxhole. It would seem like forever. It was probably a few days out of a 2-week stint in the field. Mm-hmm. And I can remember just absolutely being freezing. And you suck it up. That's just part of the way of life as you pick up the profession of arms. But I noticed when I would get a break that maybe use the restroom, whatever the case was, I'd make my way by the Tactical Operations Center. And I noticed most of the leaders that were there were sitting inside a nice warm tent, huddled around a heater. And I didn't think much of it. I'm like, well, this is a long exercise. So who knows how long it will go on. But what I noticed is no one was making trips. No one was going around to the perimeter, the defense perimeter, to check on anybody, to see how they're doing. And over the course of that 48 to 72 hours, we had 3 airmen go to the hospital for frostbite. And so, when you're in that leadership position, you have to understand, one, what your people are doing. You have to feel what they're going through so that you can make a good, sound decisions in terms of making sure that, you're taking care of them. So that's one aspect where, if you're leading by example, you understand the environment that your folks are operating in. You put yourself in that environment so that you understand how they're operating in. And that way you can make the best decisions for it. We all got our mission, we all got our orders, but it can make life easier as a leader when you understand what your people are going through.
Wow, that's a really, valid point. There's a lot of times where, and I think I'm kind of getting to this point in my career where my leadership gives us a mission, and I am responsible to ensure that mission happens, which means I have that delegation authority where I get to tell my airmen, hey, go do. And I think you're right. It's incumbent on me as the leader in that scenario to say, hey, what are they doing, and what are their struggles, and I need to know those things. And in terms, like we're talking about, that's what you're talking about right there is specific to the mission, like the environment and things like that. But I think we can kind of broaden that to even say, like, that's why it's so important for the military and the Air Force. That's one of the reasons why we're doing Airmanship 200, is we want to grow you as an individual, and so that we know that you have that, I guess, leadership experience in the background, so that we can rely on you to do jobs, more important jobs in the future. And when I'm asking you guys to do something, whether that be a menial task or something that's more important, it's important for me as the leader to be aware of what effect that has on you in an environmental aspect, a professional aspect, and then also in your own personal aspect as well. And knowing that as a leader means that I get to put people in the best spot, and then also put people in positions where they can grow. Yeah, wow, I think that is a perfect perfect negative example of sort of like a leadership thing that happened in your career. Thanks, Chief. That's cool. What about maybe a positive example of something that might have happened to you in leadership that made an impact on you, Chief?
Yeah. So fast forward, serving as a PJ over in Helmand in Afghanistan in 2012. We were doing the casualty evacuation mission in Helmand province, which wasn't good. So, the Marines controlled a lot of that territory. And at that time, we had our expeditionary group commander was an HH-60 pilot. And what I remember about that is, during the week, he'd always pick one day out of the week. We would all get together, preferably at a time in the 24-hour period where it wasn't extremely busy, and when we hoping we weren't going to get launched. But it was a rough mission, and so when you're pulling the guys off the battlefield and you're seeing some of the worst parts of conflict, you could easily kind of settle in some of those thoughts, those negativities. but he had a knack. You can tell there's just something about his leadership style. And so the way he approached it, and because he understood what the mission was, knew what it meant. He understood that, man, a lot of times weren't bringing everyone back home, right? So there were those times when you were bringing heroes off the battlefield. But one thing he did well is he pulled the whole group together. First, he'd recognize folks, right? So if it was Airman of the Month, the quarter, whatever the case was, make sure everyone understood that. But then, he would capitalize on the positive effects that we brought to that region of Afghanistan. He would talk about the number of sorties that were flown. He would talk about the number of casualties that we pulled off the battlefield, the number of saves, and the difference that made to the overall effort of the campaign. And so that, to me, he could have done a lot of things, right? He could have spent time doing a lot of other things, but he understood the sensitivity and the difficulty of that mission set. So he took that opportunity as a leader to positively influence his folks on a weekly basis, so that when you went back out, when you broke from that gathering, you felt reinvigorated to go back and keep getting after it. So that's one aspect that I thought really made a difference. I think as however long I'd been in at that point, I remember it settled well, and I recognized it because I could recognize it with both my teammates and some of and everybody. It spanned everybody. It was the maintainers that were keeping those aircraft in the air, the other fellow PJs, medics, pilots, back-enders, the whole nine yards. So it truly made a difference.
Finding ways to recognize your people, that's vitally important. And thinking about it now, especially as our airmen in training, there's ways that I guess we could probably I could look at our organization as the MTLs that I have as a group MTL and find ways to recognize our people. Thanks, Chief. I mean, that's great. That might have been something like right now that I'm realizing that I might be overlooking. That's awesome. I'll definitely be looking into that, recognizing your people and making sure that that's known through the organization. I like that a lot. Wow. So, Chief, as we talked about leadership attributes and doing things. Now, what about I know you just kind of answered this question preemptively. Give an example of a leader you'd like to emulate. Are there leaders, even now as a chief, are there leaders now that you look to emulate?
Oh man, that's a long list, Chris. I've been fortunate. I've been around just some absolute phenomenal leaders, and like I said, I'm like, man, what sets them apart? And so when I look at kind of growing up through the ranks, we all have choices every day. One, how we're going to act, who we're going to hang out with, and so when you talk about who I emulate, so that's fundamental, right? So you want to make sure that you pull the positive leaders around you, and you're careful about who you want to emulate, because again, that'll reflect on you, and because what drives thoughts turns into behavior becomes action, and then action form habits. And so when you look at who those leaders are, you want to make sure, and again, when I go back, and if we just take our core values, integrity, service, and excellence, each one of those leaders I can think back on always had that. If I think back to my superintendent in England, whether it was exercise or real world stuff we were doing, I remember him being the first one in the operations center, always ready to go. So his work ethic, his timeliness, punctuality, whatever the case is, and he was always prepared and always knew what was coming next, or at least that's what it seemed. And the only way he could do that was ensuring that he made that effort. He was disciplined enough and committed to make sure that he was there. Again, goes back to servant leadership. So when I think of those things, and I think back to the previous leaders, those were fun. I remember, when I first got in the seat, I was working with Colonel Ron Stanger, and I was curious, because I always like to try to, I call it my personal and my professional battle rhythm. Right. And it's a way I approach life in general, so that I can try my best. And I don't think I've mastered it. And I don't know. That's the goal, is to master it, but is to find balance. And I remember hitting up Colonel Stanner and I said, hey, sir, what's your battle rhythm look like? It's like, man, I get up at 3, I do some self-reflection. I do some professional development. I read, things on leadership, whatever the case was, whatever he chose to. Obviously, he got his PT in, understood what the taskers were for the day, and he was prepped and ready to go, whatever was coming. So again, it's asking questions with those leaders that you have the opportunity to work with so that you can, better understand, what made them successful. And so you start to feel that. And so when you look at the integrity piece of it, that importance of seeking what is right, even at the cost of discomfort, that's an important aspect of it, because I think that's what separates good leaders from maybe, mediocre and not so good leaders, is making those tough decisions, even when they know it's going to hurt, or it could hurt somebody else. The service aspect of it, the value placed in others before yourself. One thing that I try to really stomp on with our students that are coming through is the 3 aspects that we ask of them while they're going through special warfare prep. Sense of urgency, attention to detail, and team before self. Those are 3 aspects that, if we look back, those were key attributes, in terms of fundamental. And when you hone in on that foundation, that molding, if you will, you start to develop those key, you start connecting the dots, and you start creating that connective tissue that takes you from that follower to, protege, to, leader and mentor as you develop. So again, it's been a lifelong journey. I've always tried to surround myself or ask questions to those leaders that obviously have the experience. But again, it's not just about the experience. It's who are those leaders that are just good human beings that care about their people, and really pick their brains on what they've done, and how they did it. That's the other key part of it, because we don't just wake up one day and become Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force, or whatever the case is. You got to work towards it, and so it's important to ask questions along the way. In terms of service, my previous supervisor back in England, he wrote a book, and one of his comments he wrote in there is, a leader should lead for the betterment of the people, not for themselves. Leadership is a responsibility to serve, not a mechanism to be served. So again, when you start, it starts speaking to you, and you'll know it when you see it. You are working around these individuals that just have those leadership qualities. So that's one aspect. So it's hard to narrow down individuals, because, like I said, I've got a pretty long list. But again, the common thread, that connective tissue, was, at the end of the day, that similarity between all of them. Good human beings, and they had character and values that they believed in. They were disciplined in their pursuit, and that, I think, that's the biggest thing, is understanding. And I guess maybe we'll transition, if we still have time, to talk about leadership application. But maybe that's a good segue, because the pursuit of finding that is, again, it's a lifelong journey.
Absolutely, I agree. Yeah, I think this is great to transition to leadership application. I too have. It's hard to pinpoint specific individuals. I think about certain individuals, and I have some individuals from my time previous to being MTL as a firefighter, and then I also have been, since I've been here at Special Warfare. Cool thing about Special Warfare is you guys have, in my opinion, created a program where you've been able to really effectively create or help foster leadership, and it's really enlightening, and I feel like it's a privilege to be in this environment, because I've been around so many people that I'm like, oh man, I gotta be more like that guy. I gotta be more like that guy. I gotta be more like that guy. And so there's all these leaders that are here that I get to look up to right now, and that are helping me practice my leadership, and that I get to kind of gain some little information here and there to try and be a better leader as well. And I'm looking forward to being in this environment, and then going back and utilizing that through the rest of my Air Force career. So, one, thanks, Chief, because you're one of those people as well. Appreciate that. And then two, it's cool that this organization really has developed people in that way. And it's cool that the Air Force does that the Air Force has that mentorship program. And I mean, well, don't get me wrong, I think Special Warfare has a great ability where they're doing this in a really efficient manner and effective. The Air Force does it all over. So Airmen, as you guys are going through, look at those leadership aspects of the people that you care about. And like Chief said, it can't just be one thing. You know, you got to look at the whole picture. Like that end of your leader needs to care about people legitimately. They can't just be physical monsters. They also have to actually care about people. And when you kind of realize that, you can start to emulate people who have I guess the whole airmanship concept is what we like to call it now. It's been called that for a while, but you can start to emulate people who, when you see somebody as an airman and you think, wow, man, they got it all. That's the guy. That's the girl. That's the person you need to emulate to make sure that you're following the type of leadership style that connects for you, that helps you grow as an individual. So yeah, Chief, like you said, how do we apply it right now? How do we apply it as airmen right now, or what do you think, Chief?
Yeah, no, so that's the fundamental question, right? So I think it really comes down to discipline, right? There's a quote, I like, it's in the book Legacy, and it's what you leave behind is not what is engraved in stone monuments, but it's what is woven into the lives of others. And I like that because, again, it starts with how do we impact the folks around us? Again, whether you don't have to be the leader, right? Or just be that human being, that teammate that's going through training right now. That's, you are on a life-changing journey if you're a student sitting out there. And so I look at that and I said, oh, man, at some point you come to terms and you figure out, all right, what do I want to do? I think that's the fundamental question. So when I think how we apply leadership, first it starts with vision. All right, everything starts in the mind and how you see yourself in the world around you. So with case in point, I mean, you have to understand if you're a student now going through special warfare, at some point before you joined the Air Force, you had a vision. You saw yourself doing something, beyond where you currently were. All right, so that was step one, creating that vision. Next is understanding your strengths and weaknesses, and asking for feedback. And so a lot of times, the first, gut check or first sense is, man, I got to be physically fit as I prepare for this journey. Whether you're coming into special warfare, or just in the Air Force, or whatever you're planning on doing to better yourself, you got to understand what your strength weaknesses are. And again, not just your physical abilities, but your character, cognitive abilities, things of that nature. Again, going back to surround yourself with people that inspire and teach. What do you want to walk away with, and what feeds that into your vision? Does it align with your vision, or is it taking you off course? Because that's important. And then have a vision where you are and where you want to be. Have those milestones, those goals, and make decisions now that you'll be happy with later. Sounds easy, but it takes some time to think through that. It's important. So fundamentally, in terms of applying leadership, is having vision, first and foremost. And then beyond vision, it boils down to task and purpose. I can remember having a conversation with one of my commanders. He asked me, he's like, man, there's always so much going on, whether you're in the military, at home, whatever the case is. And he said, yeah, sir, that's purpose, right? And without purpose, what are we doing here? So we got to have that driving factor day in, day out. So that task and purpose, along with that vision, is just simply understanding the intent and the desired end state. What are your intentions, where do you want to be? And then again, when you're when you're working through your task and purpose, are you in a leadership role or are you in a follower role? And understand the importance of understanding that difference. And again, like I talked about, in terms of application, understand what that personal and professional battle rhythm is. What are your morning rituals in terms of self-development? I was Chief Master of the Air Force Wright. He's got an excellent podcast called Blueprint on Leadership. And I actually tuned in for the first time, and he was actually interviewing my old supervisor, Chief Master Sergeant Ray Colon Lopez, who is now the senior enlisted advisor to the chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff.
Wow.
And it was interesting because what they were talking about was really just kind of what you and I are talking about right now, which is, leadership, what makes a good leader? Thinking back to who were leaders that inspired you, what were they like? And then they kind of move forward and Chief Wright asked me, he's like, hey, what are your rituals? You know, what's your morning routine kind of thing? And this is important. And because when I heard him talking, I could immediately, I recognized the same language and the same timelines and time management type stuff that Chief Colon Lopez was talking about, as well as Chief Wright. And it's funny because you know, some people may not ever understand, you know, when you have vision, we have task and purpose, folks that may not just be in line with what your goals are, they may not understand, like, why do you do what you do? Why do you get up so early? Why do you PT every day? You know, they don't understand it, and that's okay. They don't have to, but you yourself, you need to understand why you're doing it. And so again, it comes back to those morning rituals, you know, self-development, and really trying to find balance. And that's the tough part. You know, I sat into a 30 some odd year career. It was hard for me to find balance, you know, between family, between the profession of arms, serving, deployments, TDYs, you name it. So that's it. It's always that balance, that journey, that quest to find balance is always going to be there. So you have to think about leading yourself through that and setting yourself up for success. And then again, that comes through assessing where you are, whether it's accomplishing the goals and the milestones. Like, is it working? Am I doing what I should be doing? And if I'm not, what do I need to do to put myself back on track? So a lot of that, those basic leadership fundamentals, we go back, we talk about the character. It starts with, you know, self-reflection on where you are and what you're trying to accomplish. If you, again, listening to all these leadership fundamentals, it goes back to that, is understanding yourself and the direction you need to move in. So I'll pause there. If you want to add anything to that?
Chief, thank you. That's awesome. And the more that you're talking about it, the more that I'm thinking about my current habits as well, right? Building healthy habits that help you become a better person. And then in turn, that just helps you become a better leader. So if right now, and then I think that's something that we can all kind of agree on. If you can look at that and say, hey, look, I can see, at least for the people that I emulate as leaders, I can see that there's a lot of healthy habits in there that maybe I'm not doing right now. Making sure that I wake up early enough to have that. The one thing that I think you hit on that really well that I think I need to work on is creating that time for self-reflection, for legitimate self-reflection. Thinking about the interactions that I've had and what I've been doing and whether or not I'm aligned with my goals. And I mean, and it's important, guys, one of the other airmanship, look back at the previous videos, because one of the other airmanship sections that we talk about, I think we talk about vision, and we go over ensuring that you write down your goals. Write down the things that you're trying to accomplish, because then it helps you legitimately create a plan to do that. Otherwise, if you write it down, if you don't write it down, it didn't happen. It's not something that's documented. It's not something that you can look back to and say, hey, this is what I want to do and why. And then creating those healthy habits. I mean, vitally important, because leadership is something that's practiced, and it's something that you have to cultivate, just like you would help. If we're trying to grow a garden, we got to make sure we're doing all the right things to grow a garden. And if you want to be a better leader, you got to make sure that you're doing all the right things to be a better leader. So maybe some self-reflection, personal development, tuning into a stream like this, reading some of the leadership books that Chief has talked about on the stream, or leadership books in general to help you practice leadership, emulating the right people, making sure you emulate individuals who, and it's good. That's a great thing. I mean, a lot of people get frustrated. I mean, at least I got little kids right now, so they're all angry when, oh, he's copying me and so on and so forth. But that's a good thing, guys. Do it. It's good. And making sure that you're focused on those goals and that vision that you have of where you want to be, and then hold yourself accountable, guys. That's for sure. Chief, this is amazing. I think we've hit a lot of stuff. The rest of this lesson kind of goes on into your own effectiveness as a leader. How effective are you, or were you? Because it asks how many of you have been in a leadership role? I mean, Chief, you're in a leadership role right now. And instead of trying to make you answer a lot of these things, I think I'm going to answer a couple of them. You say, how effective were you? And I'll be honest with you, Chief, you killed it. You're doing great. Just from my perspective, just to let you know that one for fun. How do you feel about how you are as a leader, and is there things that even you now want to improve on, Chief?
Oh, absolutely. No, I told you it's a lifelong. We're all lifelong learners, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm constantly taking notes. I'm just now completing my senior enlisted joint PME 1 and 2. So I'm about 3/4 of the way down with 2. And one of the things I just covered this morning during my morning ritual, for my professional involvement was operational design. So it goes back to having a strategy. And so, here within the group, we move quickly. There's a lot of change within the enterprise. There's training going on across multiple locations across the continental United States. So having a strategy is important. So in terms of effectiveness, I think if I'm honest, I would say where I think I need improvement on is understanding my operational design. Understand, hey, what are my priorities? How do I prioritize that's going to do the most good with the time I have? And General Goldfein, he said something pretty simple, but pretty profound at the same time at the Air Warfare Symposium this past February in Orlando. And him and Chief Wright were up there, and they make just a crazy awesome team. But the 3 Ds is something General Goldfein talked about. He said, one is do only what you can do. So when we look at, because we're all busy, we all got a lot going on. 2 is delegate as much as you can. So 1, it doesn't mean that you're shoving things off your plate and being lazy. It just means you're empowering people to get things done so that you can focus on other things. And then 3, he said, hey, delete what you can to save time and to focus on the things that are most important. Because if everything is a priority, then nothing's a priority. So, that's where I think I need, if I'm honest, that's where I need to, in terms of effectiveness, I've got to improve on. And I tell you, when you come back to, here's one important aspect is, the one thing we talk about, that we seldom talk about is failure. So if we fail as a leader, what's that mean? So whether you're a student, you're in a leadership position, you get fired, and you go back to being the team member, whatever the case is, how do you recover? What's that recovery plan, and how do you get through that? So I tell you, there's a quote I love by Winston Churchill, the famous leader that I emulate. His quote is, "Success is not final, failure is not fatal. It's the courage to continue that counts." Because we're all going to fail, right? If we're failing forward, that's even better, because now we're trying to do something positive, and we're failing, but we're going to learn from it. We're going to improve it. So again, it goes back to resiliency. And as leaders, we gotta hone in on what makes us resilient. So ensuring that we're physically, mentally, and spiritually prepared for those tasks that we're gonna go through. So again, the effectiveness of leadership, all that plays into it. And again, it goes back to those basic fundamentals. You can get that foundation, like anything else. When you start a project, if you're going to build a skyscraper, you got to have that foundation laid right so that it stands the test of time.
Yeah, Chief. Wow, Chief. I think it's about time for us to start wrapping up the stream. Is there any final words? I'm going to try and lead off. I'll lead off with this quote about remotivation. This is the remotivation quote in the lesson plan, and it's a quote from General Mark Welsh. Today, I want to leave you with the following quote from the 20th Chief of Staff of the Air Force, General Mark Welsh. Leadership is a gift given by those who follow. You have to be worthy of it. So one thing I like to say all the time is if you look down at your chest, you got U.S. Air Force on your chest, and you got to earn it every day. It's not something that you just get to. I get it. We're all obligated to our service commitment, but that right there, you have to earn every day. So do you have any, closing remarks, Chief?
No, I would just say that quote's on target. I'd say it's leadership it's less about you and it's about the people. It's about the mission. So strive to be the best version of yourself. Always continue to develop and seek opportunities to grow. And I think through that journey, you'll develop the characteristics, the attributes of becoming a good leader. And before you know it, snap your fingers and you'll be Chief Master Sergeant somewhere, and living that dream.
Awesome. Hey, Chief, thank you so much. I really appreciate you being on the stream. talking about leadership. This has been an enlightening conversation for me for sure, and I can't thank you enough. It's highly valuable to our airmen. Thanks again, Chief.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, Chief, we're going to sign off.
Bye.
Bye. Wow, what a great conversation. I mean, I'm highly impressed with the way that went, guys. That was awesome. Hey guys, thank you so much for showing up to the stream. This was an awesome conversation. I was really stoked about the way that this panned out. Practice leadership, guys. Make sure that you forgive each other when you guys make mistakes, and make sure to be a good follower as well. If you guys have any questions, I didn't see a lot of questions in the chat, so please add them to the comments, and then maybe I can review them over the next stream or something like that to that effect. Thanks for showing up again, and thanks for getting professionally developed, guys. You guys are doing great.